Today, I'm making a pork chop that is unlike any pork chop that you have ever had before. This pork chop is stuffed with homemade pesto, mozzarella, bacon, and is topped with this amazing homemade sauce that you're going to have to see to believe. It's quick and easy, and I'm going to show you all the steps, so let's get right into it. I know pork chops stuffed with bacon, mozzarella, pesto, and topped with the sauce sounds very big backish, but I promise it's not as bad as it seems, and even if it is, it's really well worth it. Now I'm going to show you how I get started. I'm using center cutlets, and these were about $5 for a pack of 5, which is $1 a piece, which is not bad at all, considering a pound of ground beef is almost $10. So this is a really economical meal. I'm going to start off by flattening them because I can't really stuff them and roll them just as they are. Now I'm going to use a tortilla press for this. Now I've never used one of these before. I usually use a mallet to flatten meat, but I've seen a lot of people use these and they've had a lot of success with it. And it's been a lot quicker. So I'm gonna give it a try and see how it works out for me. So I'm putting some plastic wrap in between just so I'm not getting this part messy or dirty. Even though I'm gonna clean it up anyway, I still just would rather not have to deal with that. So I'm just gonna do it like this and see how this works out. It looks like it's working because I can see the meat coming out of the other end. I don't wanna do too much, but I am gonna try to get just a little bit right here. Okay, that should be enough. Let's see how this turned out. Okay. Matter of fact, this is exactly what I would have done had I used the mallet. And this took me like just a matter of a few seconds to do it this way. This is perfect. So I'm just gonna set it to the side for now, and I'm gonna do the rest of them. It took me like 2 minutes max to do all of these, all 5. I don't even think it took me that long. I'm just guessing it might have been 2 minutes. I would have still been pounding on maybe my second one at that point. So this was worth it. This was definitely worth the, maybe 20 bucks that I spent on this. It was definitely worth it. And I like to do this on top of a cutting board, on a wooden cutting board, because I don't want to, this is cast iron, and I really don't want to mess with the countertop. I don't want to chip it or scratch it or anything. So doing it on top of this cutting board is a whole lot better. So now I'm going to move on to seasoning. So I'm just going to use a few seasonings for the pork chop. So I'm going to use some salt. And I always measure everything. So I feel like when you get yourself a recipe that you like, that you created, that you should write down what your measurements are or try to get close and then keep practicing it so that you know what you're doing, so that it's consistent, because you want it to taste the same every single time. So I'm gonna use some smoked paprika as well. I had some onion powder that I added. And now I'm gonna add some tarragon. And this is something you just don't see a lot of people using. And I love tarragon. I think it tastes really good with this kind of pork chop. I've never used it with fried chicken, but unless I'm doing chicken parmesan, then I'll use it with that. But regular fried chicken, I'll never use it with that. And not regular fried pork chops, but for certain things, pork or chicken dishes, I will use it. I can't really describe the flavor or the scent to you, but I want you to give it a try. I think you're really gonna like using it. I think it's gonna be something that you'll probably start using more frequently, even if you've never heard of it, or if you have, you're gonna start using it a lot more. I'm just gonna mix this up so that I get an even distribution of the seasonings. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna season both sides of my pork chops. And I'm just gonna pat it in, make sure it sticks. All right, I've got it all seasoned on both sides. So what I'm gonna do now is stick it in the refrigerator and let it rest for about an hour. And in the meantime, I'm gonna get started on the next step. Now I'm gonna start making the pesto. There is no pesto like homemade pesto. I've had store-bought pesto multiple times and it just does not compare. And homemade pesto is just too easy to make to just not do it yourself. So what I've got is some fresh basil, and I've added a few, maybe 3 to 4 cloves of garlic. I've got some pine nuts that I've added too. Some people toast them, some don't. It's really up to you about the flavor that you want to add. I added a little salt and pepper, and I'm adding in my Parmesan cheese that I'm going to freshly grate. I'm using Parmesan for my sauce too, and I'm going to freshly grate that. So I might as well freshly grate the Parmesan for the pesto as well. And I'm going to add in some olive oil. I'm using extra virgin olive oil, and I'm not using a whole lot because I want it to be just a little thick. And you see how easy this is? All I'm doing is putting this in the food processor and letting the food processor do the job. And this right here is the consistency that I'm looking for. Now it's time to get started on stuffing the pork chop. So first thing I'm going to do is cut my mozzarella into some sizes that I think will be good enough to put inside the pork chop without overstuffing it. So I've just got about maybe an 8-ounce block here, and I'm just going to cut it into some pieces. Here, I've got my crumbled bacon here, and I'm going to be adding this in as well. And this is probably about maybe 4 pieces of bacon, 4 to 5 pieces. It really is just going to depend on how much you want to put in there, but I got about 4 to 5 pieces. So this is how I'm going to stuff the pork chops. So I'm going to start with a layer of pesto. And I'm not going to put too much in, but I'm going to put just enough. I'm going to be rolling this over. I don't know how I came up with this, but sometimes I just think like, what would it taste like if this was added to this and this was added to that? And I just try it out and see how it turns out. And this turned out to be pretty good. So that's all I'm going to do there. That's it. So I'm going to do the same with the rest. So add some pesto. Got the cheese, some bacon. And I'm just gonna roll it. And if you get concerned that you think it might not actually stay, you can actually put a toothpick in here to hold it in place. Now I've got the oven preheated to 400. I'm just gonna spray the tops of these with a little bit of oil. This is canola oil. This is a pork chop is not really gonna get brown on top like you would see when you're cooking chicken. It's not gonna do that. So make sure that you're not trying to overcook this in the oven. Pork chop is pretty lean, kind of like a chicken breast. So you don't wanna cook this too long. This is really only gonna take about 20 minutes to cook. So you don't wanna cook it to the point of where the top is getting brown, because if you actually cook this to that point, it's gonna be really tough. So I'm just gonna put this in the oven for about 20, 25 minutes, probably about 20 minutes. And then I'll take it out and I'll show you what it looks like after that. And then we're gonna top it off with the sauce. Now I'm getting started on the sauce. And the sauce is gonna be an alfredo sauce. This is one of the best alfredo sauces that I've had, and it goes very well with this pork chop. Matter of fact, I've used it on a lot of things. I've even used it on steak. The season I'm using with there is some thyme, some salt, some black pepper, and some garlic. And that's really all that there is going to be to it. So I'm just going to push that to the side. I don't need to mix it up or anything because I'm going to end up putting it into that saucepan back there. The next thing I've got some sun-dried tomatoes. I'm just going to add a little bit in here because I think it goes really well. And I'm just going to try to chop these up a little bit. It's a little sticky, which makes it a little hard to kind of cut into. I don't always add sun-dried tomatoes, but I think for this, it goes really well. And occasionally I may use it for some other things too, but most of the time I don't add sun-dried tomatoes. And you see, I'm not really adding a lot. There's not a lot that I'm adding to it. Maybe like a tablespoon or so. That's about all. Next, I'm going to grate some Parmesan cheese. I like to grate it myself versus getting some pre-shredded Parmesan, because I think when you get the pre-shredded Parmesan, it just doesn't melt as easily. Parmesan is just one of those cheeses that doesn't really melt that well. So I'm gonna give myself about a cup here. So let's see how much I've got. Yep, this is just about what I need right here. I shredded just enough. And in addition to the Parmesan, I've got a little bit of chicken stock here and some heavy cream. And these are going to be the ingredients I'm using to make the sauce. So let's get to making it. Now I'm going to add some butter. It's going to be the first thing that I put in here. All right, the butter is finally melted. So I'm going to go ahead and add my seasoning. So I'm going to just add it right into there. Now I'm just going to give this a stir and just mix it in for just a few seconds to let it become fragrant. So maybe about 10, 20 seconds. So next I'm just going to put in a little bit of chicken stock. Now I'm going to add the heavy cream. So I'm going to allow this to cook for a couple of minutes before I move on to adding in anything else. Then I'm going to add in those sun-dried tomatoes that I cut up. Just add them on in there. The last thing I'm going to add is the Parmesan cheese. And so this part's going to take the longest because I want the Parmesan cheese to melt all the way. And Parmesan is a harder cheese, which is why it takes a little longer to melt than, let's say, mozzarella. But it will melt completely, and it's just about done. And the Parmesan is what's going to actually help to thicken the sauce. And that's one of the reasons that you add it, other than the flavor that it adds to it as well. So now I'm done with this, it's done. So I'm just going to let it cool down for about 10 minutes. And as I let this cool off, I'm going to move on to the next step, which is going to be to stuff the pork chops. And it's going to look really thin at first too. And so what you'll want to do is after it melts completely, is to give it about maybe 5 to 10 minutes, probably about 10 minutes, to let it cool down a little bit. And then you'll start to see how it really thickens up. And I'll show you that once this is done. This is what it looks like when it's done. You see a couple of them opened up a little bit, but that's okay, they didn't open up all the way. Now let's see what it's tasting like though. I already know it's gonna be good. See, I've had this before. I made it a few times, so I know it's gonna be good. I feel like I want some more sauce too. This sauce is so good on the top of this. This sauce is amazing on top. Now, for my side, I didn't even tell you about this. This is usually amazing. Let me taste it how it is now. Just as good as always. And this one right here is easy too. Both of these are really easy to make. You saw how easy the stuffed pork chop was. This is too. I do have a video posted on how to make this. It's really simple. But I'll also put the ingredients for you in the description so you can see how to make it too, if you want to make it. It's really simple. There's not a lot of ingredients. You just put it in a pan and you just let it do its thing. It's really not hard at all. Now that I made this dish, what I really need to figure out is what am I gonna make next? I need some ideas, so let me know what you think. And I'm gonna be looking through and see what I feel like should be the next dish.